Charles Benson, an acclaimed CEO, was at the pinnacle of success. Despite the accolades his company received, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was amiss beneath the surface. Determined to uncover the truth, Charles took an unconventional route, disguising himself as a janitor. What started as a mission to observe his employees transformed into an eye-opening journey that revealed deep-rooted issues within his company's culture. What shocking revelations awaited Charles on this daring venture? How would his discoveries reshape the future of his organization? Stay with us to find out. And before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and if this story of leadership and renewal speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe for more compelling narratives. Charles Benson stood at the vast floor-to-ceiling windows of his executive office, his gaze drifting over the vibrant cityscape below. At 45, he embodied the quintessential image of success. As the CEO of Tech Vision, one of the fastest expanding tech firms in the country, Charles's rise from a small-town boy in Georgia to a Silicon Valley powerhouse was nothing short of legendary. His company's groundbreaking advancements in AI were reshaping industries, and Tech Vision had just closed a record-setting quarter. Yet, as Charles adjusted his meticulously tailored suit, a nagging unease settled over him. The accolades and achievements felt hollow in the face of an intangible void he couldn't quite identify. A crackle from the intercom broke his reverie. "Mr. Benson, your 10 a.m. is here," Sarah, his assistant, announced. "Send them in," Charles responded, turning from the window as he straightened his tie. The office door opened to reveal Jessica Chun, head of human resources, and Marcus Thompson, the company's chief operating officer. Their expressions mirrored the discomfort that had been gnawing at Charles. "Thanks for coming," Charles said, gesturing toward the sleek conference table that occupied the center of the room. "I think we all know why we're here." Marcus nodded, his usual buoyant demeanor subdued. Jessica took a seat, pulling out a tablet. "The employee satisfaction survey results," she began hesitantly. "Exactly," Charles confirmed, taking his place at the head of the table. "Jessica, can you walk us through the key takeaways, or, rather, the low points?" Swiping through a series of charts, Jessica continued. "Overall satisfaction has dropped 15% compared to last year. Areas like work-life balance, feelings of being valued, and trust in leadership have all taken a significant hit." Charles leaned back, his brow furrowed. "And what about the open comments? Any recurring themes?" Jessica exchanged a brief glance with Marcus before replying. "A lot of feedback points to a toxic work environment. Employees feel overworked, underappreciated, and sidelined by favoritism in promotions and assignments." Before Jessica could elaborate, Marcus interjected. "But Charles, we have to put this into context. It's been a tough year. Rapid growth always comes with some challenges." Charles raised a hand, signaling Marcus to pause. "I hear you, Marcus, but we can't dismiss this as a minor growing pain. These numbers and comments paint a concerning picture." "What do you propose we do?" Jessica asked cautiously. "Team-building exercises? A revamp of our benefits program?" Marcus suggested. Charles shook his head. "This goes deeper than surface-level perks. There's something fundamentally wrong with our culture, and I need to understand what it is." He stood and began pacing. "These reports and metrics are useful, but they only tell part of the story. I want the unfiltered truth." Marcus and Jessica exchanged skeptical looks. Charles continued, "My old mentor used to say, you can't truly understand a company until you've walked in the shoes of its most overlooked employees. That's exactly what I'm going to do." Marcus chuckled nervously. "What are you saying, Charles?" Charles stopped pacing and looked them squarely in the eye. "I'm going undercover as a janitor." The room fell silent. "You're serious?" Jessica finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Absolutely," Charles affirmed. "Our janitorial services are contracted through an agency. I can get placed as a new hire without raising any alarms." "But, Charles," Marcus stammered, "you're the face of this company. People will recognize you." "That's why I'll need a disguise," Charles replied, a determined gleam in his eye. Over the next hour, the trio brainstormed the plan. Charles would assume the identity of Charlie, a middle-aged man seeking a fresh start. To complete the ruse, he would adopt thick-rimmed glasses, grow a short beard, and alter his hairstyle. "What about your family?" Jessica inquired. "I'll tell Lisa the truth. She'll understand," Charles assured her. As the meeting concluded, Marcus and Jessica remained skeptical but supportive. "I know this is unorthodox," Charles admitted, "but I'm committed to fixing what's broken. Trust me. This is the only way to see the truth." The foundation of Charles's plan was laid. Little did he know, his journey would lead to revelations that would shake tech vision to its core. Charles Benson, now transformed into Charlie, was ready to embark on the boldest journey of his life. The week of preparation had been a whirlwind. From working with a professional makeup artist to adopting a new walk and accent, every detail was meticulously planned to ensure no one would recognize the once polished CEO. As he stood before his bathroom mirror on the night before his first shift, the man staring back at him was nearly unrecognizable. Charlie wore a worn uniform and scuffed boots, a far cry from Charles's usual tailored suits and polished appearance. Lisa, his wife, appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and amusement. "I still think you've lost your mind," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Charles met her gaze in the mirror. "Maybe I have, but I have to do this. For the company, for our employees, and, honestly, for myself." She kissed his cheek, her tone softening. "Just promise me you'll be careful, and don't forget to eat the lunch I packed you." Charles chuckled, turning to embrace her. "Yes, dear. I'll be the best-fed janitor in all of Silicon Valley." That night, as he lay in bed, sleep evaded him. His thoughts raced with possibilities and uncertainties. What would he uncover? How would his employees treat him in this new role? Could this audacious plan actually succeed? As dawn broke, Charles decided to stop chasing sleep. Quietly, he dressed in his janitor's uniform, careful not to wake Lisa. He left a heartfelt note on the kitchen counter, expressing his love and gratitude for her support, and stepped out into the early morning light. The drive to Tech Vision felt surreal. Though he had made this trip countless times before, today was unlike any other. Parking in the farthest corner of the lot, away from his usual reserved spot, he shouldered his worn backpack and walked toward the employee entrance, a mix of anxiety and excitement coursing through him. At the security desk, the guard barely glanced up. "Morning. ID badge, please." Charles fumbled with the temporary badge arranged by Jessica. Yeah, here it is. First day." The guard gave a brief nod after scanning the badge. "Welcome aboard. Janitorial office is in the basement. Take the elevator on your left." As the elevator doors closed, Charles exhaled deeply, the reality of his mission sinking in. Step 1 was complete. The basement level was a stark contrast to the sleek modern offices above. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over a labyrinth of storage rooms and maintenance areas. Following the signs, Charles reached the janitorial office, where he was greeted by Doris, a no-nonsense woman who seemed unimpressed by the new hire. "You must be the new guy," she said, giving him a once-over. "Charlie, right?" "That's me," Charles replied, recalling his backstory. Doris snorted. "Don't thank me yet. You might not last the week. Follow me. I'll show you the ropes." During the crash course on cleaning protocols, Charles took mental notes of every detail. The equipment was outdated, the air smelled strongly of chemicals, and Doris winced visibly as she lifted a heavy bucket. "Any questions?" she asked after finishing the orientation. Charles hesitated, then decided to probe. "Yeah, actually. What's it like working here?" Doris's tough demeanor softened slightly. "It's a job," she shrugged. "Pays decent, better than most places, but don't expect anyone up there to notice you exist." She gestured toward the ceiling. "To them, we're invisible. Just keep your head down, do your work, and try not to get in anyone's way." Her words hit Charles like a punch to the gut. Had he unknowingly fostered a culture where employees felt unseen and undervalued? Before he could dwell on the thought, Doris handed him a mop and bucket. "All right, Charlie, let's see what you're made of. Start with the lobby and work your way up. I'll check on you later." Pushing a janitor's cart toward the gleaming lobby of the company he had built, Charles felt the weight of his decision. The early morning rush of employees barely acknowledged his presence as they passed, their eyes skimming over him as if he were part of the furniture. For the first time in his life, Charles Benson was truly invisible in his own company, a revelation that left him more exposed than ever. As he dipped the mop into the bucket, Charles took a steadying breath. This was it. There was no turning back. Whatever he uncovered over the next week, be it uncomfortable truths or surprising insights, would shape the future of Tech Vision. As the morning rush subsided, Charles found himself alone in the pristine lobby. The unfamiliar sensation of holding a mop grounded him in the reality of his situation. For the first time in years, he was seeing his company from an entirely new perspective, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about leadership, culture, and the people who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me," someone called, breaking his focus. Charles Benson, now fully immersed in his role as Charlie, found himself startled out of his thoughts by a sharp voice. "Excuse me," a young woman in a tailored blazer called out, impatience radiating from her stance as she tapped her foot. "There's a spill by the elevator. Can you take care of that?" Nodding quickly, Charles replied, "Of course, right away," carefully maintaining his practiced demeanor as Charlie. He moved toward the elevator, his eyes cast downward in humility. The woman barely acknowledged him, her gaze flickering over him briefly, as if he were no more than a fixture of the building, a necessary, but largely ignored, presence. Throughout the morning, Charles experienced invisibility in a way he never had before. Employees hurried past him, engaged in animated conversations or fixated on their phones. A few muttered polite acknowledgments or whispered a brief "thank you" when he held doors open or moved his cart to clear their path. Most, however, didn't even seem to notice him at all. By lunchtime, Charles was stationed in the cafeteria, wiping down tables and emptying trash bins. Snippets of conversations from nearby tables began to paint a troubling picture of the culture within Tech Vision. "Did you hear about the new project in R&D?" an excited voice whispered. "I heard they're only pulling people from Ivy League schools for the team." "No surprise there," came the bitter reply. "It's all about connections and pedigree around here, not actual talent." Pausing mid-wipe, Charles frowned. He had always believed Tech Vision was a meritocracy, rewarding hard work and results over background. Had he been blind to an undercurrent of elitism within his own company? As he moved around the cafeteria, his attention was drawn to a table occupied by familiar faces, his senior management team. He kept his head low, focusing on his task while trying to eavesdrop unnoticed. "I swear," Linda, the head of operations, said with an exasperated sigh, "if I have to deal with one more complaint from the customer service team, I'm going to lose it. They're like children, always whining about something." Charles's stomach twisted. Linda had always struck him as one of the company's most empathetic leaders, yet her words now seemed dismissive and condescending. "Tell me about it," another voice chimed in. "Mark, from marketing. I had to shoot down another brilliant idea from one of those junior analysts yesterday. These kids think they can waltz in with their fancy degrees and reinvent the wheel overnight." The table erupted in laughter. Charles felt his face grow hot, a mix of embarrassment and anger bubbling within him. Was this how his leadership team truly felt about the employees they were supposed to inspire? As the afternoon wore on, Charles found himself on one of the engineering floors, diligently cleaning workstations and conference rooms. He couldn't help but notice a stark divide in the office atmosphere. In one section, a group of young employees worked in a lively, collaborative environment, their desks adorned with state-of-the-art gadgets. A few rows over, however, the mood was subdued. Employees worked in near silence, hunched over outdated equipment, separated from the lively group by an invisible yet palpable barrier. By the end of the day, Charles was back on the executive floor, cleaning the plush offices he had once occupied. He took extra care here, knowing a single misstep could risk exposing his identity. While dusting a bookshelf in one of the conference rooms, a heated conversation from an adjacent office caught his attention. The door was ajar, and he recognized Linda's voice immediately. "I don't care if she's been here for 10 years, Linda said sharply. "Sarah doesn't have the right image for a client-facing role. We need someone more polished, more charismatic. But her performance reviews have been stellar, another voice countered. She knows the product inside and out, Linda scoffed. Performance isn't everything, David. We need someone who fits the Tech Vision brand. What about that new guy, Chris? He's got the look, and he's great at networking. Chris has only been here for 6 months, David protested. He barely knows the basics of our platform. He'll learn, Linda dismissed. The important thing is, he'll make a good impression. That's what matters in this business. Charles's stomach churned. He had trusted Linda implicitly, believing her to embody fairness and professionalism. Now, he was witnessing a side of her that prioritized superficial qualities over dedication and expertise. Lost in thought, Charles didn't notice Linda leaving her office until it was too late. She stopped short, facing him with a look of mild annoyance. "Excuse me," she said curtly, expecting him to step aside. "Sorry, ma'am," Charles mumbled, scrambling to move his cart out of her way. In his haste, he knocked it over, scattering supplies across the floor. Linda's expression shifted from annoyance to disdain. "For heaven's sake," she snapped. "Can you be more careful? Some of us have real work to do here." Charles bit back his anger, kneeling to gather the fallen items. "I'm very sorry. It won't happen again." Linda stood over him, making no move to help. "See that it doesn't. We can't have clumsy janitors disrupting our work. If you can't handle the job, I'm sure we can find someone who can." With that, she strode away, leaving Charles crouched on the floor, surrounded by scattered supplies. He stared after her, stunned by the interaction. This was the same Linda who had always championed workplace respect and dignity, or so he had thought. For the first time, Charles truly saw the cracks in the foundation of the company he had built, and the depth of the change that was needed. As Charles Benson knelt on the office floor, picking up the scattered cleaning supplies after his encounter with Linda, a wave of emotions crashed over him. Disappointment in Linda's behavior was sharp, but a deeper unease lingered. How much of this culture had he unwittingly enabled? Had his distance from the day-to-day operations of Tech Vision allowed such dismissive attitudes to take root? As he gathered the last of his supplies, Charles resolved to carry on with his mission, even as the burden of what he had seen weighed heavily on his shoulders. The remainder of the evening blurred into a routine of mopping floors, emptying trash bins, and cleaning restrooms. Yet, his mind remained consumed by the day's revelations. The casual disregard for lower-level employees, the blatant favoritism, and the chasm between Tech Vision's proclaimed values and the reality of its culture gnawed at him. Driving home under the cover of night, Charles replayed the day's events in his mind, feeling an exhaustion that stemmed not from physical labor, but from the emotional toll of seeing his company in such a raw, unvarnished light. When Charles pulled into his driveway, he sat in his car for a moment, reflecting. He had embarked on this undercover journey to understand his company better, but what he had uncovered so far was far more unsettling than he had anticipated. As he entered his house, he resolved that tomorrow would bring more answers, no matter how uncomfortable they might be. The next morning, Charles entered Tech Vision with a new determination. The gleaming lobby, which had once filled him with pride, now felt like a hollow facade, a superficial shell that belied the cracks in the company's foundation. Pushing his cleaning cart toward the elevators, he reminded himself that his work was far from finished. His first stop of the day was the IT department, a maze of cubicles illuminated by the glow of computer screens. As he moved from desk to desk, wiping surfaces and emptying trash, Charles's attention was drawn to one employee in particular. A man in his mid-30s moved with energy and purpose, offering help to colleagues with an easy smile and a patient demeanor. Curious, Charles deliberately knocked over a stack of papers near the man's desk. "Oh, let me help you with that," the man said immediately, crouching to gather the scattered sheets. "Thanks," Charles mumbled, keeping his janitor persona intact. "Most folks don't even notice me." The man looked up, meeting Charles's eyes with a warm expression. "I'm Henry," he said, extending his hand, "and everyone deserves to be noticed, no matter what their job is." Over the next hour, Charles observed Henry with growing admiration. Henry moved seamlessly through the department, patiently explaining complex technical issues to frustrated colleagues without losing his composure. When a new intern struggled to set up her workstation, Henry was the first to step in, guiding her through the process step by step. But what truly struck Charles was how Henry treated everyone he encountered. He greeted the mail clerk by name, helped a cafeteria worker carry a heavy package, and exchanged friendly words with security staff. "You're always so nice to everyone, Henry," a co-worker remarked. "How do you do it?" Henry shrugged, his modest smile unwavering. "We're all in this together, aren't we? A little kindness goes a long way." Charles felt a flicker of hope. People like Henry represented the values Tech Vision aspired to embody: collaboration, kindness, and mutual respect. If only that spirit could permeate the rest of the company. Later that evening, Charles prepared for his first night shift. The bustling office transformed into a quiet, dimly lit space as most employees headed home, leaving behind empty desks and screensaver-covered monitors. As he cleaned the finance department, he noticed a lone figure hunched over a computer. The blue glow of the monitor illuminated her tired face, and Charles recognized Angela, a senior accountant. Pretending to empty trash bins nearby, Charles overheard Angela muttering as she pored over spreadsheets. "These numbers can't be right," she said, rubbing her temples. "If we don't fix this now, it could be a disaster later." Charles watched as Angela picked up her phone. "Hi, Mrs. Johnson. I'm so sorry to call so late." "Yes, it's Angela from Tech Vision. I know Tommy has a big game tomorrow, but I really need those files." "Oh, you can? Thank you so much. I promise I'll make it up to you." Hanging up, Angela let out a heavy sigh. Charles could see the weight of her responsibilities written on her face. She was clearly torn between her dedication to her work and the sacrifices it demanded of her personal life. Over the next few hours, Charles observed Angela's meticulous work. She uncovered errors that could have cost the company millions, left detailed notes for her team, and double-checked every calculation. As midnight approached, Angela finally began packing up her things. Charles overheard her speaking softly into her phone. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mommy had to work late again. I promise I'll be at your next game." "Yes, I left dinner in the fridge. Don't forget to brush your teeth. I love you." The pain in her voice was unmistakable, and Charles's heart ached for her. Gathering his courage, he approached her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "I couldn't help but notice you've been working really late. Is everything okay?" Angela looked up, surprised to see someone else in the office. For a moment, Charles feared she might dismiss him, but her shoulders slumped as she let out a tired sigh. "Oh, it's just part of the job," she said with a wan smile. "There's always more to do than there is time in the day." Charles nodded, his mind racing. Angela's dedication was admirable, but her sacrifice highlighted a deeper issue: the cost of the company's relentless demands on its employees. As Angela gathered her things and left, Charles sat alone in the quiet office, reflecting. He had seen two sides of Tech Vision that day: the compassion and collaboration embodied by Henry, and the relentless pressure felt by Angela. The company had so much potential, but it was clear that change was desperately needed. Charles vowed to continue his mission, determined to uncover the truths that would help him rebuild Tech Vision into the company it was meant to be. Charles Benson sat quietly as Angela left the office, her parting words echoing in his mind. Her bitter laugh, laced with exhaustion and resignation, revealed a deeper truth. Her tireless dedication was neither acknowledged nor rewarded. As Charles picked up his cleaning supplies, he couldn't shake the growing sense of culpability. This wasn't just about Angela. It was about a systemic failure, a system he had created, however unintentionally. The next morning, Charles found himself on the product development floor. The atmosphere was markedly different. Open workspaces, walls adorned with complex diagrams, and a casual energy filled the air. As he cleaned around a group of designers clustered near a computer, a conversation caught his attention. "I'm telling you, Raj's accent is killing our presentations," one young designer said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Clients can barely understand him." "Yeah," another agreed, laughing. "And have you seen the way he dresses? So old-fashioned. He's making the whole team look bad." Charles glanced toward Raj, an older Indian man working quietly at his desk. Though Raj's expression remained stoic, his slightly slumped posture and darting glances betrayed his awareness of the remarks. The sting of such casual cruelty was evident, and Charles felt a sharp pang of anger and shame. Later, in the break room, Charles witnessed another instance of targeted disrespect. A group of younger employees gathered near the coffee machine, their laughter carrying across the room. As an older woman approached, their demeanor shifted. "Oh, here comes Dinosaur Donna," one of them muttered, prompting a wave of chuckles. "Better watch out. She might think the coffee machine's a fax." Though Donna's face flushed, she held her head high, poured her coffee, and left quickly. Charles felt his chest tighten. This wasn't harmless banter. It was deliberate, cutting, and unwarranted. Worse, it was indicative of a deeper cultural problem, a lack of respect for diversity in experience and perspective. As the day progressed, Charles overheard two middle managers in a conference room discussing an upcoming project. "So, who's going on the team for this one?" one asked. "The usual suspects, I guess," the other replied with a shrug. "What about Sarah from engineering? I heard she had some great ideas for this." "Sarah? Come on. She's not exactly leadership material. Too quiet, doesn't put herself out there. We need people with presence, you know." Charles felt his heart sink. The casual dismissal of talent in favor of superficial qualities was everything he had hoped Tech Vision would never become. By the time Charles's shift ended, his mind was awash with conflicting emotions. Employees like Angela and Henry embodied the values Tech Vision was supposed to stand for: dedication, kindness, and collaboration. But instances of favoritism, casual cruelty, and an obsession with appearances pointed to a cultural rot that couldn't be ignored. Sitting in his car, Charles pulled out a notebook and began to write. The issues he had witnessed were not isolated. They were part of a larger, more insidious pattern. Tech Vision's culture, once grounded in inclusivity and meritocracy, had somehow morphed into something unrecognizable. Somewhere along the line, the company's rapid growth had overshadowed its foundational values. As he connected the dots, Charles realized that the root of the problem lay in middle management. The very people he had trusted to uphold Tech Vision's principles were perpetuating a culture of exclusion, favoritism, and narrow-mindedness. Linda's dismissive attitude, the designer's derision of Raj, and the manager's casual rejection of Sarah, they were all symptoms of a deeper issue, a misunderstanding or outright disregard of what Tech Vision was supposed to represent. Driving home, Charles wrestled with the weight of his discoveries. How had this happened under his watch? Had he been so removed from the day-to-day operations of his company that he failed to notice these cracks forming? And more importantly, how could he fix it? When Charles walked through the door, Lisa was waiting for him, concern etched on her face. "Another rough day?" she asked, noting his troubled expression. Charles nodded, sinking into a chair. "Lisa, I think I've made a terrible mistake." "What do you mean?" she asked, sitting beside him. Charles met her gaze, his eyes a mix of regret and determination. "I've let Tech Vision become something I never intended. The culture, the values we started with, they've been twisted into something I barely recognize." Lisa placed a comforting hand on his arm. "But you're seeing it now," she said gently. "That's the first step to making it right." "You're right," Charles agreed, his voice heavy with resolve. "But this isn't going to be easy. This isn't just about implementing a few new policies or organizing team-building exercises. We need to rebuild Tech Vision's culture from the ground up." For the first time in days, Charles felt a glimmer of hope. Yes, the challenges ahead were immense. The problems were deeply ingrained, and the path to change would be long and difficult. But he had built Tech Vision once before, driven by a vision of what a great company could be. Now, armed with the unfiltered truth of what his company had become, Charles was ready to rebuild. He would restore Tech Vision's foundation, not just for the employees who had been overlooked and undervalued, but for the future of the company as a whole. Charles Benson stared at Lisa, her question hanging in the air like a challenge he was ready to meet. And then, he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "We rebuild it all. We make TechVision the company it was always meant to be, a place where talent is cultivated, hard work is celebrated, and collaboration and kindness are the core of everything we do." Lisa smiled, her hand resting gently on his. "That's the Charles I know. The visionary who isn't afraid to face hard truths and do the right thing, no matter the cost." Charles nodded, a small smile forming as he settled into bed, though sleep eluded him once again. His mind raced with plans, not just for the next day, but for the transformation he knew would follow his mission. This wasn't just about observing or uncovering, it was about changing the course of TechVision entirely. The next phase begins. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the window, Charles woke with a renewed determination. Donning his janitor's uniform felt different today, not as a disguise, but as armor for the battle ahead. This wasn't just undercover work, it was a quest to find the soul of his company. Arriving earlier than usual, Charles headed to the customer support floor. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, a handful of employees were already at their desks, handling inquiries from global clients. Among them was Angela, her dedication evident, despite the exhaustion etched on her face. As Charles cleaned nearby, careful to remain unnoticed, he overheard a conversation between Angela and a younger co-worker, Jake. "Angela, you're here early again?" Jake asked, concern in his voice. "Didn't you just pull a late shift last night?" Angela gave a weary smile. "You know how it is, Jake. The work doesn't do itself. Besides, if I want any shot at that promotion, I need to show I'm committed." Jake frowned. "But you're already the most dedicated person here. Surely they see that." Angela chuckled bitterly. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone sees us at all. But hey, that's life in the big leagues, right? We keep the company running, even if no one knows our names." Charles felt a deep pang of guilt. He had always prided himself on fostering a workplace where every employee felt valued, but Angela's words painted a starkly different picture. Suppressed voices. Later, in the product development department, Charles observed a team meeting where ideas were being pitched for a new feature. Among the participants was a young woman named May, whose body language screamed discomfort. She tried several times to speak, only to be interrupted by louder, more assertive colleagues. Finally, in a burst of frustration, she blurted out, "What if we approached this differently? Instead of focusing on speed, we could prioritize accessibility for users with disabilities." The room fell silent for a moment before the team lead spoke. "That's actually an interesting idea, May. Why didn't you say something earlier?" I've been trying to, but," May started, only for the lead to cut her off. "Well, speak up next time. We can't read minds here." Charles watched as May shrank back into her seat, her idea acknowledged, but the moment soured by the implicit criticism. He made a mental note to investigate how team dynamics might be stifling diverse voices and innovation. Integrity versus compliance. Later in the day, Charles returned to the IT department, where he had first met Henry. Today, Henry was in a heated discussion with his supervisor, a rising star in middle management. "This new system is riddled with security vulnerabilities," Henry argued, his usual calm demeanor replaced by urgency. "If we rush to implement it, we're putting client data at serious risk." The supervisor dismissed him with a wave of his hand. "Henry, we've been over this. The board wants it live by the end of the quarter. We don't have time for your paranoid security checks." "But enough," the supervisor interrupted. "You're a great tech, Henry, but you need to see the bigger picture. Sometimes we have to take calculated risks to stay competitive. Now, are you going to be a team player or not?" Charles watched as Henry returned to his desk, frustration and resignation written across his face. It was clear this wasn't the first time his concerns had been dismissed. The clash between Henry's professional integrity and the pressure to conform was palpable, and Charles could see the toll it was taking. A heavy burden. By the end of his shift, Charles felt drained, the emotional weight of his observations pressing heavily on him. The casual cruelty, the dismissal of valuable contributions, and the prioritization of short-term gains over long-term integrity painted a grim picture of TechVision's culture. As he changed out of his janitor's uniform in a maintenance closet, Charles caught sight of his reflection in a dusty mirror. The man staring back at him wasn't just a CEO in disguise. He was a leader facing the enormous responsibility of rebuilding what he had allowed to falter. The breaking point. The next morning, Charles entered the building with the same determination, but a growing sense that something was about to shift. Each step felt heavier, weighed down by the disconnect between the company he thought he had built and the reality he had uncovered. Tech Vision was at a crossroads, and Charles knew the decisions he made in the days to come would determine its future, not just as a business, but as a community of people who deserved better. The stakes had never been higher, and for the first time, Charles understood that true leadership wasn't about steering from the top. It was about getting down in the trenches and lifting everyone up. The morning began like many others during Charles Benson's undercover mission. Quietly, as he pushed his cleaning cart through the labyrinth of cubicles and corner offices, the routine hum of workplace activity surrounded him. Early arrivals offered the occasional polite nod, though most barely acknowledged his presence. The invisibility of support staff within the daily operations of Tech Vision was becoming a painfully clear reality. When Charles reached the executive floor, a sense of unease settled over him. This space, with its sleek glass walls and polished conference tables, had been the backdrop for many of his most startling revelations. Today would be no exception. As he cleaned the glass panels of a conference room, the sharp click of heels echoed down the corridor. Charles tensed as Linda, the head of operations, rounded the corner. Her voice was raised, carrying a tone of authority laced with frustration, as she spoke to two other executives trailing behind her. "I'm telling you," Linda said sharply, "if we don't meet these targets, heads will roll. I don't care how we get there, but it needs to happen." One of the executives, the head of marketing, spoke hesitantly. "Linda, I get the urgency, but some of these goals are unrealistic. Our teams are already stretched thin." Linda cut him off with a dismissive wave. "That's not my problem. If your teams can't handle it, maybe we need to find people who can. This is the big leagues, gentlemen. There's no room for weakness." Charles's heart sank. The Linda speaking now was cold, ruthless, and utterly focused on results at the expense of employee well-being, a stark contrast to the compassionate leader he once believed she was. Lost in his thoughts, Charles had stopped cleaning without realizing it, the squeak of his cloth on the glass ceasing abruptly. Linda's sharp gaze turned toward him, narrowing as she registered his presence. "You there, janitor!" she snapped. "What do you think you're doing?" Charles straightened, adopting his Charlie persona. "Just cleaning the windows, ma'am," he replied quietly. Linda approached the glass, running a manicured finger across the surface. "Well, you're doing a terrible job. Look at these streaks." Her lip curled in disdain. "Is this really the best you can do?" Suppressing a flicker of anger, Charles lowered his gaze. "I'll do better, ma'am," he said, his tone measured. Linda wasn't finished. She turned to her colleagues with a cruel smile. "You see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Mediocrity. It's everywhere in this company." From the bottom, she gestured dismissively toward Charles. All the way up, the other executives shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Charles's gaze. None of them dared to challenge Linda. Taking a deep breath, Charles responded softly, "I assure you, ma'am, I always try to do my best work." Linda laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Your best? If this is your best, you should consider a line of work that doesn't require skill." The contempt in her voice cut deep. Anger bubbled within Charles, mingling with disappointment and sadness. For a moment, he considered breaking his cover, confronting Linda, and revealing who he truly was. But he held back, knowing this painful moment was offering invaluable insight into the culture he needed to change. "I'll try harder," he replied simply, keeping his eyes on the floor. Linda scoffed, seemingly disappointed by his lack of reaction. With a final, dismissive wave, she strode away, her colleagues trailing behind her like scolded children. As their footsteps faded, Charles leaned against his cleaning cart, his mind reeling. The interaction had shaken him deeply. Witnessing such blatant cruelty firsthand was almost more than he could bear. A gentle touch on his arm startled him. Turning, he saw Henry, the kind-hearted IT worker, standing beside him with a look of concern. "Hey, don't let her get to you," Henry said softly. "Linda's been like that with everyone lately. It's not personal." Charles managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Henry. I guess I'm just not used to being spoken to like that." Henry's expression darkened. "Nobody should be. It's not right," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Things didn't used to be like this, you know. This company, it used to stand for something. Now, I wonder if anyone remembers what that was." As Henry walked away, his words lingered in Charles's mind. There was still hope, still a foundation worth rebuilding, but Linda's behavior was a stark reminder of how far Tech Vision had strayed from its original values. A quiet revelation. Later that afternoon, Charles found himself in the accounting department. The office was unusually quiet, with many employees away at a company-wide training session. As he emptied trash bins and wiped desks, a muffled sound caught his attention. Rounding a cluster of cubicles, he found a man hunched over his desk, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Charles hesitated, unsure of how to approach, but compassion won over caution. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you all right?" The man looked up, hastily wiping his eyes. Charles recognized him as Terran, a longtime employee who had been with Tech Vision almost since its inception. "I'm fine," Terran said quickly, his voice strained. "Just allergies, you know." Charles nodded, pretending to accept the obvious lie. "Of course. Can I get you some tissues? Or water?" Terran's composure faltered. No, it's okay. Thanks." Charles hesitated, then quietly said, "I've been around long enough to know that sometimes it helps to talk. You don't have to, but I'm here if you want." For a moment, Terran said nothing. Then, with a deep breath, he muttered, "It's just, this place used to feel like a family. Now, it's all targets, deadlines, and politics. I've given everything to this company, and it feels like none of it matters anymore." Charles felt a lump in his throat. He placed a hand on Terran's shoulder. "It does matter. Don't let anyone make you think it doesn't." Terran nodded, his eyes glistening. "Thanks," he said softly. As Charles continued his work, Terran's words echoed in his mind. The cracks in Tech Vision's culture were deeper than he had imagined, but conversations like this reminded him of the resilience and heart still present within the company. Charles vowed to honor that heart, to rebuild Tech Vision into a place where every employee, no matter their role, felt valued and heard. Charles took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle over the room. His voice softened, carrying an air of gravity and respect. "Angela," he said, his gaze meeting hers in the crowd, "you embody the kind of dedication and resilience that keeps this company running. I've watched you tackle challenges that would overwhelm most, often sacrificing your own time and well-being for the good of this organization. You've caught errors that could have cost us millions, and yet you do it quietly, without expecting recognition. Today, I want to say what I suspect many here haven't said enough. Thank you." Angela's colleagues turned to her, clapping and nodding in agreement. She smiled nervously, her face flushed, but the glimmer of pride in her eyes was unmistakable. Charles continued, his tone shifting to one of somber reflection. "But I've also seen things that deeply trouble me, things that cannot and will not continue." He paused, scanning the room, his voice steady but firm. "Over the past week, I've witnessed acts of kindness, collaboration, and innovation that inspire me, but I've also seen cracks in our foundation, cruelty, favoritism, fear, and a sense of disconnection that I can no longer ignore." The room grew still, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. Charles knew the moment had come to reveal the full extent of his mission. "You see," he said, his voice breaking slightly as emotion crept in, "this past week, I haven't been watching from the corner office. I've been walking these halls, working alongside you, not as your CEO, but as a janitor." Gasps rippled through the auditorium, murmurs quickly spreading as employees turned to one another, disbelief etched on their faces. Charles raised his hand to quiet the crowd. "I disguised myself and stepped into your world to see what life is truly like for the people who make Tech Vision what it is. And what I saw," he paused, his voice thick with emotion, What I saw was a company with extraordinary potential, but also one that has lost its way. The murmurs ceased, replaced by an intense, focused silence. Charles's voice grew stronger, tinged with resolve. I saw employees like Henry, who lead with compassion and integrity, even when no one is watching. I saw Angela, who works tirelessly to uphold the highest standards, even at great personal cost. But I also saw something else. I saw Terence. He scanned the room, searching for Terence's face. When he found him, he locked eyes with the man who had bared his struggles just days before. "Terence," Charles said gently, "would you please stand?" Terence hesitated, clearly taken aback. Slowly he rose, his expression a mix of vulnerability and apprehension. "Terence has been with this company for over a decade," Charles began, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "He's given his weekends, his holidays, even time with his family, all to help Tech Vision succeed. And yet, when he needed us the most, we failed him. That is not the Tech Vision I set out to build." The room was silent, every eye fixed on Charles. "I met employees who feel invisible, unheard, and undervalued," Charles continued. "I saw leaders who prioritized results over people, who dismissed talent because of appearances, and who allowed fear and favoritism to take root. This is not who we are, and it is not who we will be moving forward." The tension in the room was palpable, the weight of Charles's words hanging in the air. "This is a turning point," he declared, his voice rising with conviction. "Today, we begin rebuilding Tech Vision from the ground up. We will restore this company's heart and soul, not with hollow promises, but with action." Charles stepped forward, gripping the edges of the podium. "Effective immediately, we will be implementing sweeping changes. We will reevaluate our leadership, provide better support for our employees, and ensure that no one, no matter their role, feels unseen or unvalued. This is my promise to you." The crowd erupted in applause, the sound reverberating through the auditorium. Charles's eyes swept the room, taking in the faces of his employees, some hopeful, some skeptical, but all listening. As the applause died down, Charles smiled, his tone softening. "I know this won't be easy. Change never is. But I believe in this company, and I believe in all of you. Together, we can rebuild Tech Vision into something we can all be proud of, a place where innovation thrives, collaboration is celebrated, and every single person knows they matter." He stepped back from the podium, the applause rising again, louder this time. As he looked out over the sea of faces, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Tech Vision, but for himself as a leader. Charles Benson stood at the edge of the stage, his gaze sweeping across the silent auditorium. The weight of his words, of the past week's revelations, and the announcements he had just made lingered heavily in the room. He let the silence hang for a moment longer before speaking again, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "Together," he said, his tone resolute, "we can make Tech Vision not just a leader in innovation, but a model for what a workplace should be, a place where every single person feels valued, heard, and empowered to do their best work." The audience sat motionless, the depth of Charles's speech sinking in. Slowly, a ripple of applause began, growing steadily until the entire room was on its feet. The sound was deafening, a mix of approval, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. Charles's heart swelled as he saw the faces of his employees, some with tears in their eyes, others with determination etched into their expressions. He raised his hand, signaling for the applause to settle. "This isn't the end of the story," he said, his voice firm. "It's just the beginning. Change won't come overnight, and it won't come without effort. But I believe in this company, and I believe in all of you. Together, we will rebuild." As the crowd began to disperse, Charles lingered on the stage, watching his employees file out, many of them talking animatedly, some even stopping to shake hands with colleagues they had never spoken to before. He saw Linda standing off to the side, speaking quietly with Angela and Henry. There was a glimmer of something new in Linda's demeanor, a willingness to listen, a softness that had been missing for far too long. Terrence approached the stage, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for seeing us, for hearing us. I didn't think anyone cared anymore." Charles stepped down from the stage and clasped Terrence's hand firmly. "I see you," he said, "and I'm sorry it took me so long, but that changes now." As the auditorium emptied, Charles walked slowly back to his office. It felt different this time, not an ivory tower, but a hub for real change. He sat at his desk, pulling out a notebook where he had scrawled observations during his undercover journey. Flipping through the pages, he smiled. The notes were messy, written hurriedly in quiet corners, but they were filled with stories of resilience, moments of humanity, and lessons that would guide the future of tech vision. Charles reached for the phone, dialing his assistant, Sarah. "Let's set up a company-wide meeting schedule for the next month," he said. "I want to hear directly from every department, every team, every voice." Sarah hesitated. "Every department? That's a lot of meetings, Mr. Benson." Charles chuckled. "Call me Charles. And yes, every department. If we're serious about change, it starts with listening." Hanging up the phone, Charles leaned back in his chair, exhaustion mixing with hope. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to face them head-on. A new chapter. Over the following weeks, the changes Charles announced began to take shape. Anonymous reporting systems were implemented, and an independent team was formed to handle workplace concerns. The overhaul of performance reviews and promotion criteria sparked initial resistance, but as employees saw the first round of merit-based promotions, trust began to rebuild. The comprehensive benefits review revealed significant gaps that were quickly addressed, offering employees more flexibility and support. Leadership training sessions became a cornerstone of the new culture, with Charles himself attending the first session as a participant, setting the tone for accountability from the top. One day, as Charles walked through the cafeteria, no longer invisible, he stopped by a table where Linda was sitting with a group of junior employees. She was laughing, her body language open and engaged. Catching his eye, she gave him a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they were on. Across the room, Angela and Terrence were deep in conversation, their faces animated as they discussed a new project proposal. Henry was showing a younger employee how to troubleshoot an issue on a laptop, his patience and warmth as unwavering as ever. For Charles, these small moments were the real indicators of progress. Policies and procedures were necessary, but the true measure of change was in how people treated each other, in the culture they built together every day. As he walked back to his office, Charles thought about the journey ahead. There would be setbacks and difficult days, but he was no longer afraid of them. Tech Vision wasn't just a company, it was a community. And for the first time in a long time, that community felt alive with possibility. Sitting at his desk, Charles opened his notebook to a fresh page. At the top, he wrote 3 words: "The vision restored." Charles smiled as he listened to Terrence speak, his words filled with gratitude and a renewed sense of hope. "For the first time in years," Terrence continued, his voice steady with emotion, "I was able to attend my daughter's school play last night. She was so happy to see me there. It reminded me of what I've been missing." Charles felt his chest tighten, a wave of both pride and regret washing over him. "Terrence," he said, his hand still resting firmly on his shoulder, "that's exactly what this is all about. We're not just here to build a successful company. We're here to create a place where people can thrive, both at work and at home. Thank you for reminding me why this mission matters." As Terrence nodded, his eyes shimmering with gratitude, Charles turned back to Henry. "Keep me updated on the task force's findings. I want to make sure we don't just listen, we act." "Absolutely, Charles," Henry replied, his determination evident. "This is just the beginning." Charles left the IT department with a sense of fulfillment, his steps lighter than they'd been in years. He made his way to the cafeteria, where employees were gathered in lively conversations, their voices filled with a newfound energy. The once subdued and segmented atmosphere had given way to one of collaboration and openness. At a table near the window, Charles noticed a familiar figure. May, the young woman who had hesitated to share her ideas during the product development meeting he'd observed weeks ago. This time, she was animatedly discussing a project with a group of colleagues, her confidence visibly growing. As Charles approached, she looked up and smiled. "Good morning, May," Charles said warmly. "How's the project coming along?" "It's going great," May replied, her excitement palpable. "After we implemented some of the changes the task force suggested, everything started to click. And, well," she paused, glancing at her colleagues, "I finally feel like my voice is being heard." Charles nodded, a proud smile spreading across his face. "That's exactly what we're working toward. Keep it up, May. Your ideas are helping shape the future of Tech Vision." As he left the cafeteria, Charles's heart swelled with pride. The changes were taking root, not just in policy, but in the culture, the very soul of the company. Employees who had once felt invisible were now stepping into the spotlight, their contributions recognized and celebrated. A transformative moment. By the end of the day, Charles found himself back in his corner office. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows, once a symbol of isolation, now felt like a beacon of possibility. The desk was piled with reports and updates from various departments, each one a testament to the progress being made. Lisa walked in, her smile warm as she placed a cup of coffee on his desk. "You look different," she said, leaning against the doorway. "Lighter," Charles chuckled, taking a sip of the coffee. "I feel lighter," he admitted. "It's incredible, Lisa. The changes, the energy, the people, it's like the company is coming alive again." Lisa's smile widened. "I knew you'd turn this around. You've always had a way of seeing the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves." Charles leaned back in his chair, a sense of contentment washing over him. "It's not just me," he said. "It's everyone. People like Angela, Henry, Terrence, and even May. They're the ones making this happen. They're the heart of Tech Vision." Lisa crossed the room, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And you're the one who gave them the chance to shine." Charles looked up at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "It's just the beginning," he said, echoing his earlier words. "But for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about what's ahead." A legacy rebuilt. In the weeks and months that followed, Tech Vision continued its transformation. The culture of fear and favoritism was replaced with one of accountability, transparency, and genuine collaboration. Employees at all levels felt empowered to share their ideas, knowing their voices mattered. Angela's empathetic leadership set a new standard for managers across the company, while Henry's task force became a cornerstone of Tech Vision's ongoing efforts to foster inclusivity and innovation. Terrence, once on the brink of despair, thrived with the support of the new assistance programs, becoming a vocal advocate for employee well-being. For Charles, the journey was far from over. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to learn, grow, and lead with purpose. The Undercover mission that had started as a desperate attempt to uncover the truth had transformed not only the company, but also Charles himself. As he walked through the halls of Tech Vision one bright afternoon, Charles paused to watch his employees, collaborating, laughing, and creating together. The company wasn't just a leader in innovation anymore. It was a place where people could be their best selves, where every role mattered, and where the vision they all shared was finally coming to life. And for the first time in years, Charles Benson felt truly at home. Charles paused, his gaze fixed on his reflection in the polished floor of the lobby. For a fleeting moment, he didn't see the polished CEO he had once prided himself on being. Instead, he saw something deeper, someone who had rediscovered the true essence of leadership. He saw a man who had stepped out from behind his desk, walked the halls of his company, and learned what it truly meant to lead with purpose and heart. As he turned away from the mission statement on the wall, its words seemed to resonate more than ever. "We believe in the power of technology to improve lives, and in the power of a positive work culture to bring out the best in every individual." They were no longer just aspirational. They were actionable, guiding every decision, every initiative, and every conversation. The ripple of change. Walking back to his office, Charles reflected on the day's interactions. Each moment, each conversation, felt like a thread weaving together a tapestry of transformation. He thought of Angela, now leading her team with empathy and collaboration, of Henry, whose unwavering kindness had become a cornerstone of the company's renewed culture, of Terence, who was finally rediscovering joy and balance in his life, and of May, whose overlooked voice was now a vital part of the company's future. The changes at TechVision were not just in policies or procedures. They were in the very fabric of how people treated each other, how they valued one another. It was a culture shift, and Charles could feel its momentum building. As he entered his office, he noticed the small potted plant Lisa had brought him earlier that day. Its bright green leaves seemed to symbolize growth and renewal. Charles smiled, brushing his fingers against the leaves as he sat down. He opened his laptop, pulling up the agenda for the next day's leadership meeting. But before diving into his work, he leaned back in his chair, letting a moment of calm wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt truly connected to his company, not just as its leader, but as a part of its community. A vision realized. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of progress. The Coffee with the CEO sessions became a hallmark of the company's new approach, with employees from every department sharing their thoughts, ideas, and concerns directly with Charles. These candid conversations led to meaningful changes, streamlined workflows, improved support for work-life balance, and initiatives to foster collaboration across teams. Angela's leadership began to inspire others, with her team consistently exceeding expectations. Henry's task force brought to light not only the challenges employees faced, but also the untapped potential within the company. His insights led to new mentorship programs, ensuring that junior employees like May had the support and encouragement they needed to thrive. May's accessibility project became a flagship initiative for TechVision, earning widespread acclaim both within and beyond the company. Her presentation at the product development meeting was met with enthusiasm, and her ideas were quickly integrated into the company's core offerings. Even Linda's journey was one of redemption. While her demotion had been a difficult moment, her commitment to change proved genuine. Leading the ethical leadership training sessions, she began to rebuild trust and redefine her role within the company. A renewed purpose. On a sunny Friday afternoon, Charles found himself walking through the office once more, taking in the energy and camaraderie that now defined TechVision. He stopped by the break room, where employees from various departments were sharing laughs over coffee. He passed the IT department, where Henry was reviewing task force findings with a diverse group of colleagues. In the product development area, May was finalizing her next big project, her confidence shining as she collaborated with her team. Finally, Charles reached the lobby, where the mission statement gleamed proudly on the wall. This time, as he read the words, they felt alive, a true reflection of the company TechVision had become. As he stood there, Lisa walked in, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Taking a moment to reflect?" she asked, joining him by the mission statement. Charles nodded. "It's amazing, isn't it? How much can change when you stop and really see people, when you listen and act with intention." Lisa smiled, placing a hand on his arm. "You've done something incredible here, Charles. You've given this company its heart back." Charles turned to her, his expression both humble and resolute. "We've done it, Lisa. All of us. This company isn't about me. It's about every person who walks through these doors. And we're just getting started." As they left the lobby, Charles felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had been challenging, but it had led to something greater than he ever could have imagined. TechVision was no longer just a leader in innovation. It was a model of what a truly great company could be. And for Charles Benson, that was the greatest success of all. Charles Benson, once the embodiment of corporate success in an expensive tailored suit, now saw himself differently. As the sunset bathed the sky in hues of orange and pink, he smiled at the memory of Charlie the janitor, a role that had humbled him, opened his eyes, and reshaped his understanding of leadership. That memory wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was a cornerstone of the man he had become. Walking to his car, Charles felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for the journey he had undertaken, for the lessons learned, and for the second chance to make things right, not just for himself, but for the entire company. Tomorrow would undoubtedly bring new challenges and decisions, but for the first time in years, he felt excited to face them, not as a distant CEO cloistered in a corner office, but as a leader who walked alongside his team, committed to building something extraordinary, one day at a time. As he drove home, Charles's thoughts turned to a saying he had once heard: "A true leader doesn't create followers. They create more leaders." He thought of Angela, now leading her team with empathy and wisdom, of Henry, whose kindness and collaboration had become a beacon of Tech Vision's new culture, and of May, whose once overlooked ideas were now shaping the company's future. Their growth and leadership gave Charles hope that Tech Vision was finally moving in the right direction. The road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles. Transforming a company culture wasn't a one-time effort, but a continuous journey. There would be resistance, missteps, and tough decisions to make. But Charles felt ready for it all. The work wasn't just necessary, it was meaningful. And that, for him, made all the difference. When Charles pulled into his driveway, a sense of peace settled over him. Lisa greeted him at the door, her warm, knowing smile lighting up the evening. "Good day?" she asked, though the answer was evident in Charles's relaxed posture and bright, hopeful eyes. "The best," Charles replied, pulling her into an embrace. "We're making progress, Lisa. Real, meaningful progress." Over dinner, Charles shared the day's events with her. He recounted moments of growth and collaboration, the courage of his employees to voice their ideas, and the tangible shifts in the company's culture. His voice brimmed with excitement, not about profits or market dominance, but about the lives he was helping to uplift and the culture they were building together. As the evening wore on, Charles found himself reflecting on the transformation, not just of Tech Vision, but of himself. Leadership, he realized, wasn't about power or prestige. It was about service. It was about lifting others up, creating an environment where everyone could thrive, and fostering a sense of purpose and belonging for every person in the organization. In the quiet of the night, as Charles drifted off to sleep, he held on to a simple truth. The measure of his success wasn't in titles or accolades, but in the positive impact he could create for others. It was a truth that had taken him years to rediscover, but now it was the foundation of everything he did. Charles Benson's journey from CEO to janitor and back wasn't just a story of corporate transformation. It was a story of personal redemption and the power of humility. His willingness to listen, to learn, and to lead with empathy created a ripple effect that reshaped his company and inspired everyone around him. If Charles's story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories of change and impact. And before you go, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How would you have handled the challenges Charles faced? Would you have taken the same risks or chosen a different path? Share your perspective in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going, because leadership isn't just about where you stand. It's about the journey you take to get there.